All right, so I've talked about it before, so this won't be a surprise, but there really is only one car on this planet that I fully, wholeheartedly, and unabashedly love. And that's the Porsche 992.1 911 Turbo S. It's the car that I've been daily driving for the past 2 or so years now. I've reviewed this thing. I love it. I have almost only great things to say about it. But Porsche did something very interesting. They just unveiled the successor to this car, the 992.2 Turbo S. And it's a hybrid. Now, they invited us out to Spain to check it out, but I'm busy. I'm going to Nationals for Ultimate Frisbee in San Diego at the same time, but Miles isn't busy, so Miles is gonna go to this event in Spain. So Miles, if you don't mind, I have a few questions as an owner of this car about the new one.
Yeah, so I am here to test out the new 911 Turbo S and find out on Marquez's behalf if it's a car that is worth upgrading to and really seeing where this mountain peaks with electrification in the 911. There it is right there. Let's dig into it. What do you got for me?
All right, so I guess the perfect place to start is the new powertrain, right? This is the headlining new feature. So just to give us the on-paper specs, what is new about this Turbo S versus this 3.8 liter flat six that we've come to know and love?
Okay, so in a surprising turn of events, the engine has actually gotten smaller. Your car has a 3.8, technically 3.7 liter flat six. This is now using the same 3.6 liter flat six found in the GTS, but there's a huge difference. This now has 2 electrically powered turbochargers as opposed to 1 in the GTS. So, as you can imagine, power has gone up just a wee bit. We're now looking at over 700 horsepower, 0 to 60 in the low 2s, and that's all thanks to those 2 turbochargers plus an e-motor in the gearbox. This car is not slow, and we'll dive into that a bit more later. But pretty substantial, if not one of the most substantial .1 to .2 power increases in the Turbo S's history. It's pretty crazy.
Okay, so this thing's clearly going to be quick, and we'll get to that. But that's just on the inside. I'm curious about the outside of this car because, frankly, I love the outside of the 992.1. I think it's perfectly understated, and I know they don't change 911s much from year to year, but I'm curious if there are any actual or noticeable aesthetic differences about a .1 update to this 911.
So aesthetically, there aren't a whole lot of changes, but by far what's most noticeable are these active aero shark fins that are also on the GTS. So pretty much the exact same thing copy and pasted onto this car. And that's effectively it for the front of the car. But then when you take a look around back, you'll notice that the diffuser has been tweaked a bit. This is a new diffuser design that was not available on .1 Turbo S 992. And we also have this new take on the exhaust tips. This is one of 2 options you can get for this car. You can get the standard ovular exhaust, or you can get this kind of more traditional quad exhaust setup. I think I like the ovals a bit better, but this has its own look to it as well. I don't dislike it. And the rear taillights are slightly different, but other than that, aesthetically, it's the same car outside of the, you know, T-hybrid badges, because Porsche has to let you know, this is the hybrid one. This is the one that go fast.
Okay, pretty specific question, but I've seen different things in different places. So that car you're driving, what tire is it on? Because I've seen, you know, all those like promo videos and everything. It looks like they're almost always on a Pirelli P0R. But when I play around on the Porsche configurator, lately it's been a little Michigan logo on the side of the tire. So what tire is it?
Now, while I do love Michigan, I gotta say I love Michelin a little bit more. Sorry, I had to poke fun at you for that. Yeah, this car is running the Pirelli P0Rs. Now, I do prefer Michelin tires. I think that's just the goated option if you can get it. But these P0Rs, I think they're perfectly fine on this car. It handles the weight. It grips well. It allows you to achieve a pretty solid 0 to 60, which we'll get into. But so far, that's what I've got on this car. There are other press cars floating around in Spain right now that may have different options, but more than likely they're rocking the P0Rs.
So one of the absolute best features in these cars up until this past generation has been a little touch of analog in the turnkey start and the real tachometer. Let's give that a... Doesn't get better than that. But those are gone from the new Turbo S, unfortunately. Are there any other new things about the interior, though?
So we're gonna have to pour one out for the turnkey start and the analog tachometer in the 911 Turbo S. It is gone now. We have a fully digital gauge cluster now in the 911, as well as no push to start or no turnkey to start. That's in the GT3s, thankfully. So if you want a GT3, that'll be the one car with turnkey to start. But the gauges are going to be fully digital for every car from now on. And let's just take a look at it. So this is like the 4th or 5th Porsche I've driven with the fully digital gauge, maybe 6th or 7th when you include Macans and Cayennes as well. And I'm starting to get used to it more and more day by day. It certainly isn't as cool as the analog tack in the middle on the previous car. I would still consider it a downgrade, but I understand where people are coming from as far as not being able to see all the gauges with having the analog one in the middle. And this is just far more customizable. You can do so much more with it. And I understand why Porsche went this route. It's just one of the many little things that Porsche is doing to kind of eliminate that classic Porsche experience, which is a bummer, but I'm not mad at it. And I in practice, I think it's the better move, but having the analog tack is cooler. But other than that, layout is effectively identical to what you have in the .1 Turbo S, which I think is great because I don't think anything needed to change. I don't think anything needed to change with the steering wheel. I don't think anything needed to change with the center screen. I don't really think anything needed to change with the center console layout either. You have all the buttons for all the necessary stuff: exhaust, traction off, your suspension settings. Everything that you need to have access to is still just as easily acceptable and accessible, and that's the way we like it. That's definitely the way I like it.
Okay, well, it is a Porsche 911 after all, so I suppose the most important question is, how does it drive? And you know, we did review and check out that GTS. The 992.2 refresh of the GTS is also a hybrid, but it's one huge electrified turbo. And this 911 Turbo S is twin turbo. And there was way more torque down low in like the 2,000 to 3,000 RPM range. Kind of felt almost like an electric car with how much poke you had at those lower speeds. But talk to me, does this car drive better than the GTS? How does it feel?
All right, so right now I've got the car in Sport Plus mode, and I'm in some pretty technical Spain country roads. Lots of tight turns, not a whole lot of open straights, but just enough for me to really get a sense of, how exactly powerful this car is. Coming from the 992.1, which is already a very powerful car, it's actually kind of shocking how much quicker this feels. I mean, 700 horsepower is always going to be a lot of power no matter what kind of sports car body you throw it into, but just the way this thing takes off like an absolute rocket it's phenomenal. The weight, right? That's a huge thing with this car. And I gotta say, despite the fact that it's, almost knocking on 4,000 pounds, you don't really feel it a ton, and that's because of something that Porsche's implemented with this car. It's called EHPDCC, basically electro-hydraulically powered Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control, which basically means the sway bars are electro-hydraulic now, and that's really helpful for taking this car into corners. That's where you're going to feel the weight the most when you're moving it from side to side. Does it feel like a heavier 911? Yes. Although it doesn't feel that much heavier than the GTS, it does feel heavier than the GTS. But I do think any 992.1 owners are going to get in this car and notice, yeah, there's a shift in weight for sure. And it really depends on the type of guy you are. Some people buy this car as a daily to go fast in a straight line occasionally. And so if that's what you're going to be using this car for, I don't think the weight really makes a difference when we're talking about this amount of a weight gain. But for track use, for just pure enjoyment and super dynamic situations, it might not be as enjoyable as prior 911s that are just smaller and lighter. That's just what it is. But regardless, this is a really, really excellent car to drive, given the stats, given the numbers. And I'm barely pushing this car. I'm not really familiar with these roads, so I'm not trying to go too crazy, but it's so excellent. And not to mention very comfortable, so much more comfortable than the GTS. That's something that's probably one of the biggest takeaways, is how much more comfortable this is to drive, even in the sportiest setting, than the GTS is.
So I have a feeling that this car, this refresh, is going to be competitive for the new YouTube Drag King title. And I remember, Miles, before you flew out there, you were talking about how you think this might be sub 10-second quarter, sub 2 second 0 to 60. I wasn't so sure. I mean, I see 200 extra pounds on the stat sheet and I see 50 more horsepower or so, but I'm curious if you feel, now that you've driven it, that this could be the new YouTube Drag King like this car was.
So I was wrong. You can't do 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, at least with the current setup and on the street. It seems like 2.4 is the best that this specific car is capable of. But I mean, what are we talking about here? 2.4 seconds? I mean, that's nuts. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I do think that this is probably, you could call this the new YouTube Drag King. I don't think that there's going to be many cars that are going to be able to keep up with this in a straight line off the line. You know, once you get past the quarter mile, that's a different story. But I mean, I think this is for sure a sub 10 car in the quarter. And 0 to 60, maybe you can do under 2 with the perfectly ideal spec, perfectly ideal conditions. But unfortunately, we couldn't get that today. But I mean, the fact that I'm saying unfortunately we couldn't get less than 2.4 seconds, I mean, I think that sentence speaks for itself.
Okay, this may be too specific of a question, but I feel like Porsche people may appreciate your answer here. You and I have driven the hybrid GTS from this year, and with the prices going way, way up of all these cars, you know, that GTS is really quick, really powerful. It feels like just as quick and fun as this stock Turbo S was. Is there a real difference between the new GTS hybrid and that Turbo S hybrid? Like, is the fun factor higher? Is there really enough to spend that much more money, or should people just get the GTS?
So I guess the biggest thing that has surprised me with this car in terms of driving, because it's more or less what I expected, which is a good thing, is how much quicker it feels than the GTS. I really didn't think the gap would be as wide as it is. It's a wide gap. I mean, this thing, especially when going from like second gear and giving it like 80% throttle, this thing is just monstrous. It's demonically fast. It's absurd, quite frankly. And so I guess the benefit of having that speed with the hybrid setup is that it feels like you're taking advantage of it more, as opposed to turbos of the past, where you feel like you kind of have to really, really be pushing the limits as far as speed to feel like, yeah, I'm in the supercar, because you didn't have that instantaneous throttle response. Now, I mean, this is as close as we're going to get to EV-like acceleration in a 911. It truly is that explosive, and that much more explosive than the GTS, which was already a very, very fast car. Steering is excellent as always. The hybrid system hasn't ruined that. The PDK transmission is excellent as always. The hybrid system hasn't ruined that. Straight line speed, it does that. I think it does that pretty well. Handling, despite the weight, is it'll do. It'll do, I think. I wouldn't have said this about previous versions of 911, but I kind of just look at this as a better version of the GTS. You've got the same hybrid setup. It just goes significantly quicker. It's more comfortable to drive, yet still just as dynamic as the GTS. I think this is a proper upgrade if you're coming from the GTS, for sure. I think it just does everything the same, but better. Unless you just have to have rear-wheel drive, there's not many advantages of going with the GTS over this.
All right, well, I guess there's only one more question, and it might not have a real answer, but you can try anyway. Owners of this car, the 992.1 Turbo S, I don't think you need to upgrade. I think there are some nice minor improvements, and if you have to have the latest and greatest thing, you already decided to buy this car, but how far back should you go before thinking that this is a real meaningful upgrade? This brand new 2026 Turbo S, as Porsche stacks a bunch of tiny incremental improvements year after year, how far back do you go before you go, okay, this is a real serious upgrade?
You're right. I don't think that this is a necessary upgrade for 992.1 995.1 owners, I think you're perfectly fine with the car you've got, unless you just really want to experience a hybrid. But I feel like if you weren't sure after driving the GTS that you wanted the hybrid version of the car you do have, then I don't think this car is going to change much for you. But what we should do is get this at the studio so you can really find out for yourself. I think if you're driving a 991.2 car or prior, this is going to be one of the most transformative upgrades you can make from generation to generation for a 911 that you could ever do. Everything about electrification when it comes to this car is just improving all the areas in which this car was just slightly lacking. Mostly just low down torque, being able to punch out of corners with the highest amount of acceleration. It's just such a capable car, despite it being nearly 4,000 pounds. They're getting heavier and still somehow handling better than the cars that came before it and being faster than the cars that came before it. 0 to 60 in the low twos and still being able to take it to get groceries, drive it on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere in Spain. You really can do anything and everything with this car. So just like most Porsches, there's practically zero compromise. And I think if you're okay with the tech changes that are being made with the inside, if you're at a 991.2 and prior, this is going to be a really phenomenal upgrade. It's the 911 Turbo S, man. It's the king of the hill for a reason. And while these cars are getting continually more expensive, like for example, this one is about $283 with just a couple of options, and you can spec them well into the 300s, maybe even close to 400 if you tried. There's a reason for that, many of them being economical, but the other half of it is that there's not much you can compare this car to, and so some people are just going to continue to be able to justify owning a 911 and buying a 911 because it's just that good. So that's about it. Thank you to Porsche for letting me have a go, and subscribe if you want to see us drive this car at the studio in Dirty Jersey. That's about it. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.